Thank you all for being here today. This is a press conference to talk about the changes anticipated for community centers in 2012. My name is Christopher Williams. I'm the acting superintendent for Seattle Parks and Recreation. And I'd like to start out by reiterating how we got here and where we are. The City Council in the last budget process asked the executive and park department to look at ways of operating community centers that would reduce their reliance on general fund support. The process we undertook was a transparent, inclusive process which included members of the public, Seattle Park and Recreation staff, Council Central staff, and lots of interested partners who were concerned about the future of our community centers. We took into consideration the age, the size, and the usage of community centers, really all with the notion that we should move away from a cookie-cutter approach and try to arrive at a model that tailored program delivery and services based on need, demand, usage, and some other forms of data. It's a more tailored program delivery model. It doesn't treat every center the same. However, it does attempt to provide sort of a programmatic level of access to services and programs. And what that means is when we think about our community centers, our parks, our pools, we don't try to provide a park, or rather a pool, for example, in every single neighborhood. But what we try to do is offer enough program access by sprinkling enough pools across the system so that people can have that programmatic access to a swimming pool. And that's sort of the model we're approaching the delivery of recreation programs here today. So later on, you're going to hear from Councilmember Bagshaw, the mayor, Mr. Cunningham, who served on the committee, and Bill Keller, the executive director of the Associated Recreation Council. These changes you're going to hear about are not without enormous impacts to the staff. You know, I always like to say to staff, you know, some of this might hurt you individually, but we've got to keep in mind that our goal is to serve the public, and we know that these changes are going to affect people's ability to pay their mortgages, to provide for their families. These are not insignificant changes. Changes always happen through the culture of the organization, and how we get staff to kind of embrace these changes and adapt to the changes is the work of the department over the next 4 months to January. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a lot of budget reductions in parks. Some of this has been painful for our staff, but the idea here is to have the public not miss a beat, and have the public not be aware that we've made changes to community centers or there's been changes in how we manage the park system. The idea here is to sort of implement these changes in as seamless way as possible, as not to interrupt the delivery of services and recreation programs. The proposal represents a fundamental shift in how we've operated our community centers in the last 30 or 40 years. This change will set a tone moving forward, maybe for the next 30 or 40 years, in how we operate our community centers. So with that, I'm going to pause, and at this time I'd like to introduce the mayor, who's been a huge supporter of Seattle Park and Recreation, I think particularly during these tough economic times. The mayor has offered his support, has offered his ear, and has been a good listener to the changes happening in the department, and has really been a great supporter. So thank you, Mayor McGinn. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. We know your leadership has been really critical this whole time. I also want to thank Councilmember Bagshaw for joining me today. She's been a real leader on this issue on the City Council, and we wouldn't be here today without her hard work and involvement. So, we're all aware that we have less revenue in city government. We had a $25 million hole to fill in the 2012 budget, and as we look out into 2013 and 2014, that will get larger. So we have to continuously look for ways to find efficiencies and save money. But community centers are very important to the public, and we need to find ways to keep them operating while saving money. One option is just simply, keep the same model we have and reduce hours and staffing to get the savings. The other option was to look at how we provide the services and try to reduce the operating costs while preserving to the greatest extent possible the direct services to users. So as Christopher mentioned, currently community centers all offer the same services, with the exception of schools, of course. But there's wide variation in how those services are used from center to center, and a cookie-cutter model for each center isn't the most efficient way to do it. So we brought together members of the public, including teens and seniors, city council members and staff, city budget office staff, labor union members of the park board. And they analyzed data. A lot of this data, you may have noticed that when you went to community centers, we were asked to sign in. And that was new. I have to say, they always made sure I signed in everywhere I went. And I know a lot of community centers. We held public meetings, we conducted public survey, and designed the alternatives from which the recommended model was chosen. It helped us, all of that helped us understand what the community needs were. And we're still gathering data, and we'll still continue to refine the system based on the data we receive. But the plan we're announcing, that even in your declining revenues, we are maintaining our commitment to all community centers. We're keeping all the community centers open. The plan will save the city $1.2 million in its approach, which is very significant in light of the $25 million budget problem that we face. $784,000 is budget savings from the new staffing model. And I'm going to echo what Christopher said. When we say reduce operating costs and new staffing model, we're talking about employees and people who care about the city and have been working to provide services to the city. So we're going to have to work with staff on these changes, and they are significant. And we appreciate the work that they have done for the city. $446,000 is from our nonprofit partner, Associated Recreation Council, that will partially cover community center expenses, and they will continue to provide child care and a registered program outside of the hours when a center is open for general use. The plan sets up 5 geographically based service areas, which you see on the map. So what we've done is each sector will have a community center with a high level of service hours, offering a wide range of services. Within each area, other centers will provide levels of service based on a detailed set of criteria, including what services are currently used the most at each center. Park staff will work with people in the community to establish operating hours and decide on programming, and we'll try to avoid duplication of programming within the service area. So, for example, within a geographic service area, one center may open early while another stays open late. One may lean more heavily on sports, another one may lean more heavily on arts programming as their primary offering. So it's a more flexible system, and that can be more responsive to the needs of the community, and it gives us that flexibility across multiple centers. Some centers will see their hours expanded under this plan because there's a heavy use and because there's a higher need. Some will see their hours reduced. Again, that is determined based on the data we receive, the public input we receive, and the collaborative process we use to develop a plan. You know, bad economic times cause us to make choices, but it also means that sometimes we have to rethink how we do business and come up with a better solution. This change came about because of budget pressures. But we do think we're going to have a more flexible and responsive and tailored system than we had in the past because we were forced to examine some of the way we do business. We also made sure to include a race and social justice filter when determining the service levels in each center. The reality is that there are some populations for whom these services are critical, and we need to make sure that we have availability in the right hours for the young men and women who may be facing a more challenging childhood than others. There will be 3 levels of service for the community centers. The service level 1 center will be open for general use 50 to 70 hours per week. The service level 2A center will be 30 to 45 hours, and the service level 2B center will be 15 to 25 hours. And you'll see that in each area there's a mix of the types of service level centers. So again, this plan preserves services to the greatest extent possible by keeping centers open with services that are matched to the needs of the community. You know, some people, and in advance, we know when we go out, some people will see, as we said earlier, that the service of the hours in their center will be reduced. The programming that used to be where they were is now in the center. But we'd ask everyone to not look at this in terms of their geographic location, but to look at it for the system as a whole, because that's how we're looking at it, you know, at a regional level and at a system-wide level. So again, we tracked usage of community centers closely to find out where the demand was, so we can deliver the services where the demand is. And we believe it's a good plan. We will stand under scrutiny, but we also stand ready to work with the community and revise it. I think one of the strong points about it is that because it gives us more flexibility, it will enable us, if we can find ourselves in a position to find a little more money to put back in the system, to be able to increase hours in a way that meets the greatest demand as well. We are all waiting for that day when we can be pushing the envelope a little bit and we can be looking optimistically about new revenue. We're not there yet, folks, but we're going to keep plugging away in the city of Seattle, keep working hard to make sure we have a strong economy, and I know we'll get there. With that, I would like to introduce Councilmember Bagshaw for leadership again on this issue, help us get to this proposal. So thank you, Councilmember.
Good afternoon. When I became Parks Chair a year and a half ago, I was faced with two problems that were conflicting. One is a real need to take care of Parks budgets. As all of you know, Parks has really taken a disproportionate hit over the last couple of years. And I did not think it was fair to see parks, which are such an important part of the quality of life that we have, take another hit that would impact either how we were operating our community centers, our parks, or the needed maintenance that we have. And the second thing is that I really wanted to have a strategic plan that used our money wisely to say, how are we going to keep our community centers open, but also respond to the needs of the community. As many of you know, if you've been to our budget committees, we hear over and over again from people like you how critical the programming is for each person. And nobody wanted to see anything reduced in their own particular neighborhood. So what we did was come together with two groups actually, of people that included parks employees, neighborhood people, leaders from each neighborhood, plus our council central staff, the budget office, to take a look at this. You all know that we have 25 community centers, and it costs roughly $500,000 a piece to operate these community centers now. And as the mayor and Christopher have said, when we've got tight budget times, we have got to make sense about how we're spending our money. So last fall, City Council passed what we call a SLI, that stands for a Statement of Legislative Intent. And what we wanted to do was to really look at how we were working with our community centers and how people use them. So this was actually a council-driven effort, but Parks embraced it, and we're really grateful. Christopher, to you, I see Sue Goodwin back there, Carol Everson was also a leader in that. And what happened, what came out of that was something very new. For the last 8 months, these two groups have been working. I mean, really, for the community volunteers, Jim, who are here, Jim Cunningham, a real selfless effort to look at their own neighborhood usages. But as Christopher said, we asked for real data. We wanted to know how many people were using these community centers, how many people were actually using them for exercise, or perhaps for playing bridge, or swimming, yoga, whatever. But we wanted to know at what point were the community centers actually being used by the community. And so the groups offered us 9 different options. And these options were everything from close specific community centers completely to reducing hours. And we came up with this notion of the geographic management approach. And that is going to be our primary option. And there are other things that we will do also to raise revenues and to protect the neighborhood community centers so everybody gets something. And over time, this is a starting point. So if neighborhoods are able to say, we want to be able to have different programming, independent programming, that is going to be an option that will be available and open to you. And as I mentioned, my expectation was really twofold for this. I wanted to find a way to keep all 25 of our community centers open because we know that this is important to you. And then also, we wanted to make sure that our decisions were community-driven. What we're doing today is a starting point, and this can change. And each community will have an opportunity to say, we want or need more hours, and we're going to flexibly find ways to add programming to our individual community centers. And I think that is a great start. By managing these in geographic clusters, we are going to be able to save money. As Christopher and the mayor said, we're looking at $1.2 million. That is a big savings when we've got a $25 million budget hole that we're going to need to fill. And since we know that this is a starting point and we're going to be able to adjust as we go, I believe that we've got a baseline that is going to really make our community centers better. And I especially want to thank people in this room that have been working on this. And Jim Cunningham, you are one. Carol Everson, I mentioned. Sue Goodwin, another. We have labor people here that were participating in that. Kathy Nyland from my office really took the lead. We've got Kieran King back there from Council Central staff. It mattered because people came together to find a solution. So in order to be successful in this, we're going to need your support. I know that this is not going to be something that everybody is going to embrace and say, this is the very best thing for me, but we can change. And we can add programs, and we can make sure that the kind of programming in each geographical area is the kind of programming that you want. And we have gotten to this point because of the dedication of the people that have worked on this for the past 8 months, but also for all of you who have provided this input. We've had public meetings, we've received thousands of email suggestions. Those have been heard and incorporated. So, again, many thanks to all of you for participating and that you care enough about your community to be here. And I'm going to pass the microphone over to Bill Keller. He is the Executive Director of ARC, which is our Associated Recreation Council. And he's been very important and a key player in this as well. So, Bill?
Well, good afternoon. We're going to talk a little bit about where we're going and how we got there. But first I want to thank Acting Superintendent Christopher Williams, Mayor McGinn, and Councilmember Bagshaw for the opportunity to participate in this. This has truly been a process where the public is represented, where information has been exchanged, viewpoints are considered, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. You should know that the Associated Recreation Council has been working in partnership with the Parks Department for 36 years. Some of those have been good years, some of those have been challenging years. Think of all the presidents, mayors, council members, and superintendents that we've worked with over those 36 years. In 2001, budget cuts started becoming more and more serious. Less and less staff, less and less hours of operation, less and less resources to work with. In 2010, when we started planning for 2011, we took one of the most serious steps we've ever taken, and that is 5 sites, 5 community centers. Laurelhurst, Green Lake, Ballard, Alki, and Queen Anne had their hours reduced and their staff reduced together. So we started January 1st, 2011 with really a partnership experiment on how can we make this work, how can we continue to serve the public. And we learned a lot. In the first 90 days, we learned that we couldn't run those sites without Parks leadership. We had the doors open, we had a program running, but it wasn't as good as it should have been. So by July of this year, we increased leadership at the site. We had rec attendants at the counters, we had custodians working really hard, 20-hour weeks. And the way we were able to do that as a partnership is the Associated Recreation Council contributed $234,000 to keep the doors open and the lights on at those 5 sites. But we learned that our partnership could do this together. That from the program classes and activities that we delivered if we had a sustainable plan and we combined our resources as a partnership, that we could keep the doors open and the lights on. That helped us inform the options that are now being considered and proposed. Now, what option 2 actually does is reorganizes geographically, that it keeps the doors open and the lights on. The Associated Recreation Council will contribute in 2012 $446,000 to do that. It's a step up from what we're doing in 2011, but it's the right thing to do. Our partnership has worked together for 36 years. Some people have called it a marriage, and for all of those out there that are married, you know, you have some good days, and there's some challenging.
36 years is awesome.
Well, we made it 36 years, we do 36 more. We'll try. But the real message here is that this option keeps the doors open, the lights on, and the community served. And I really want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be a part of that. Got to work with Carol Everson, Sue Goodwin, Q1, Kathy, whether she'll admit it or not, but we will keep the doors open, the lights on in 2012. It shouldn't go unnoticed that these challenging economic times don't seem to be going away. That we're kind of in this for the long haul. And so, as we set the table, as Christopher said, for the next few years, we're committed to making this work financially from the Associated Recreation Council in this partnership, but we need community support to make this work. So take a hard look at it. I believe it's the right thing to do. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce my good friend and fellow council member of the CCRC.
Thanks, Peter, for the introduction. It was great working with you over these 8 months. Just real briefly, my name is Jim Cunningham. I'm a resident of Queen Anne. I'm an avid supporter of the community center, all of our community centers. I'm a father of 3, and I'm also a volunteer member to the Queen Anne Community Council. First and foremost, I want to thank Councilmember Bagshaw for her leadership on this issue. As a fellow resident of Queen Anne, you listen to our concerns as a neighborhood, as a whole, when we faced the imminent closure of our gymnasium, which was part of the community center. You drafted the slide, you got people rallied, you pulled in different faces from different groups, and pulled this together to have meaningful dialogue and discussion. As a resident, I got to meet a lot of people that I didn't know in the Parks Department, which is a very strong and capable team. I was honored to be part of that team, and I appreciate you putting that together. Our community centers are paramount to a thriving city and neighborhood, and as you can tell by all the folks here today, it's important to all of us. It's our job as citizens to be good stewards with our resources, and I think this plan, and I support this plan, of locating or doing this grouping, the 5 groupings of our community centers. What I will tell my residents of Queen Anne, what I would implore all of you, is now with this asset and that the doors are open, that we utilize these facilities to the maximum and give our elected officials a reason why we should throw more resources into this. They've done the first step to keep it open. Now it's our responsibility as citizens to utilize them. I want to thank you for your time, and I'll hand it back over here to the mayor. Thanks.
So, questions? Yes?
This is a Department of Neighborhoods question as much as anything. It says here that Southwest Community Center will become partly a specialized center, partly a neighborhood service center. So for West Seattle, does anyone know, will the Delridge Neighborhood Service Center, which is the only one we have now, close?
I don't have an answer to that question. Let me follow up with you
Thanks.
on that. I'll let Aaron. You got it, Aaron? We'll see what we can say. Never.
Could you pick a couple of community centers to tell us specifically how the hours are changing? For example, some of those for level 1, level 2A, 2B, like Miller or Ballard or Laurelhurst. How much will they get cut?
So in Southeast, why don't we use Southeast Seattle for the example here? So we operate in this
Christopher,
geographic.
you want to stand at the mic? I'll hold it.
Okay. So I'll give you sort of a general example. We operate 5 community centers in what's considered Southeast Seattle here: Rainier Beach, Manasol, Rainier, Jefferson, and IDCC. We will move to a model, and currently these community centers operate about 48 hours a week. Okay? So across the board, they all operate the same number of hours. What we're doing that's going to be a radical change here is, say for example, Rainier Beach is serving more people, bigger footprint after it's open. We will operate this community center anywhere from 35 to 45 hours per week, for example. That's a tier 1 level of service. A tier 2 level of service might be 30 to 35 hours a week, dropping down to tier 2A, 2B, which is yet another lower level of service. So the difference in the level of service at the lowest level could be as much as 20 hours of service difference.
So, for example, Van SL would be how many hours would they be losing?
So I don't have the detail on that right in front of me, but I can get it.
You do have it. So Van Essel's in 2B, so that's a lower one.
It's a lower one.
Yeah, so Jefferson and Rainier are at level 1. International District Van Essel gets at level 2. And Rainier Beach is not on
I'm just trying to get a sense of how much the level 2 and 2A and 2B community centers are going to lose overall.
So it's somewhere between 15 and 20 hours per week. In some cases 30.
Lynn?
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand also, looks like northwest, southeast, both have 2 of the high service levels, and all the rest have 1. So can you tell us how that decision was made?
That decision was reached for the same reason. It's based primarily on usage data.
So those would be currently the highest use in that geographic area?
And I think this is accurate. Correct me if I get it wrong. We looked at smaller groupings. We looked at groupings of 3 at a time, with different service levels. And, then we went to 5 because that actually gave us a little bit of more flexibility so that regions could be a little bit different from each other, as opposed to having a cookie cutter model that now at 3 at a time.
Hi.
Yes.
I work in the High Point community. My question is, have you done the process of finding out what the community needs are for each of the groupings? Because I've heard no cookie cutter approach, right? So how do you determine that?
So we will have community meetings with the public to have a discussion with them moving into January, and really raising the question: which hours work best for your desired programmable needs for drop-in use? What kind of programs you want to see? That really will be the result of a community conversation.
Sure.
So we've had multiple community meetings where people from across the city have come and joined us. One we did up in Middlebrook about 6 months ago, one in Jefferson, and one in Bitter Lake. And what we heard from people and what we promised is that we want to hear from each of these geographic areas what services that you want, but also what hours do you want them. Because there are some areas that have said, what we want to do is have an early morning gentle exercise or Pilates class. And we'd like to get started at 7 in the morning and perhaps have hours that close and then reopen again after school. There are other communities that have said, we really want this to be a team focus, and we don't really need you to be open until the kids are out of school. So maybe that means 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and going later. So we're very open to be responsive to just the needs that you have raised.
Yes.
So there was a lot of discussion about partnerships last year, about consumer partnerships to help with the new model. What's the status of those kind of relationships, and is that something that might affect the level 2 centers?
This is one expression of our interest in partnerships. There are others, but as Bill was talking about, the partnership with the Associated Recreation Councils is very important to us. And they are in the buildings providing services, and how can we improve our coordination and partnership there? And there's also a financial support that they've been providing. So this is one area where we're talking about partnerships being real. The parks budget is more than just the community centers. We also have facilities that we're exploring what our partnership opportunities are in facilities to get investments, and we'll still be looking at other types of activities in parks that might be revenue producing and consistent with the mission of that park. So those are other examples where we're looking at partnerships. We've also seen people offering to volunteer to provide more, and that's another example. And I suppose finally the voting centers are another one, where Lake Washington Rowing Center and Green Lake Small Craft Center are both ones where we're looking to get more of a partnership with the community and take a little bit of the burden off of us and move it on to a community associated recreation councils. So but I'm going to say something else about partnership. There's partnership of a financial partnership, there's partnership in operations, but I think what you're also seeing in this process was a partnership around defining the mission and the best set of solutions. The fact of the matter is, last year, Christopher, when did you become the acting director? What month was it? About June. So about June, we had a new parks superintendent, and that's pretty close on up to budget submission time. And so we had to, in that 2 months and a $6 to $7 million budget deficit, come forward with a proposal. This year gave us an opportunity to be far more thoughtful, but it also gave us an opportunity to really partner. And my direction to Christopher was to work with Councilmember Bagshaw and was to work with the community output and really, create the space in which there could be a partnership around what's the best way to approach this problem from a policy level as well.
How many positions will be lost?
1 second. It is in the press release. So there's a certain number of positions reduced, approximately 13, but we'd also see different hours and reduced hours for up to 75 people. Part of the savings, so I can talk about this a little bit. With this model, now that we can talk about it in more detail, how we provide a management level for this, because you have to have staff people present in the facility to keep them open. So that's one cost. The other cost is how do you manage the people who are present in the facilities. So going through a regional model enabled us to get some savings at that level. Is that an accurate characterization? And so that gives us savings. That's the other part that gives us savings. So we'll see hours, we've done the math on the hours, we see overall hours go down slightly. But you have to realize all you're looking at is hours, you're not measuring usage. We're trying to make sure that the hours that are open are targeted to the times of highest usage. So this is, like I said, a more flexible response that can get and when people are actually using them so we can get the most service out of it.
You've been making a big push to make Seattle a more walkable or bikeable city. So what do you say to people who are kind of used to having community centers in their neighborhood that you walk to or get to easily? You're basically telling them that that's just not going to be the case anymore in a lot of cases.
It concerns me. I would like to have, long term, I would like to use these capital facilities that the voters have supported consistently. They voted to open these capital facilities. I'd like them to have more hours over the long run. So that is something that concerns me. But we have budget realities right now that means we have to examine how we do business. So this is not the ideal alternative. It's the best alternative we have after broadening the input under the financial circumstances we face.
And you talked about going back to the communities and asking specifically if they want changes. Does that mean changes within the limitations that you set in terms of hours, or might some of these community centers see more hours after you've gone through this process?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we're talking about right now is we've provided a baseline. And that as we talk with you, as we talk with neighborhoods, to be able to say, well, some of these maybe need more, they need to be adjusted. If the neighborhood were to come together, for example, and suddenly the usage of a particular community center just magnified, that it was, suddenly people were saying, we really need to use that, of course we're going to take that into consideration. And already there's some flexible tools that you may or may not know about. For example, on Cunningham, as I understand it, there is an independent group that puts together a Pilates class at 6 or 7 in the morning. And they have access to the building. That group is come together, they pay for their own class, and then even though the building may not be open fully for everyone, it is open for that particular class and people to be involved. So those are the kinds of things that we want to look at to make sure that we have your input, but also that the community is showing us that yes, this is the building they want to use. So we'll see.
But if you're going to add hours, potentially, how are you going to achieve that same amount of savings?
Well, I think initially we're not going to be able to do much more than the first go as what we're talking about here. But over the next 6 months and a year, we'll be able to see change. So understand that this is something we're trying to do, again, be strategic and to be able to save money. So there's not going to be we do not have a magic bag of cash that we're going to be able to take right now and say, just kidding, that we're going to actually have additional hours. These are going to have to be earned and figured out as we go.
Yeah.
A question regarding what Mr. Keller said. Here in West Seattle, we covered very extensively how last year's changes affected the Alki Community Center and the very heavy burden that it placed on volunteers in the ARC. And I'm curious if that sort of thing is going to be seen by more of your councils around the system, even if they're not, say, a 2B. Will the council, the Recreation Council, have to step up further, even in the, say, 2As or the full-service ones?
Basically, we, as a group, we're going to take on this challenge, and all the community centers will contribute together to reach that dollar target. What we did at the 5 sites for this year, where each of those 5 sites carried the financial burden separately, whereas in 2012, the whole system will join together to meet this challenge.
Got a question for Jim Cunningham.
Yes.
I'm just curious, as somebody who's in one of the sites that's recommended for smaller or fewer hours, is that preferable to you guys to having no community center? Kind of what you weighed
Definitely.
looking at, how you would fit it?
Definitely. I think, it's easy for people to say, not in my house, right? That's a familiar statement that we're all familiar with. And we'd rather have the opportunity that the venues are open. And as I had mentioned, this is a rally cry to the community. And I know that, Councilmember Bagshaw and her staff visited every community center at all different kinds of hours, and they looked at the utility of the venue. So it's our job to kind of go in there and, work, with the people that are in that facility on the programming. We spent a lot of time trying not to have a one-size-fits-all. Seattle's a very diverse city, and so I think definitely we want it to be open and then get involved.
Yes.
I'm Kathleen Crump, and I was a member of the Community Center Advisory Team, and I just want to sort of put in my sort of voice of support for this as a really reasonable pathway, given really tough choices in the process. I want to really honor that Parks was very responsive, and it was some very candid conversation. My question is really about community process, because the success of rolling this out, in fact, will have a lot to do with the conversations with communities and with neighborhoods. And the challenge, the challenge, if you look at the geographic areas, is that within any geographic area, you've got really divergent demographics. So Bitter Lake demographically is not the same as Magnolia. So you have to sort of both take it very locally, but then in that geographic area as a whole. So I just am wondering, Mayor McGinn, if you can comment on sort of how to bring the right resources to bear to make sure that this community conversation piece really works well, and in fact actually is Department of Neighborhood's positioned so that they could really work with Parks and with ARC to make this go really well.
I think that's a very insightful observation about the nature of, and community input is always challenging.
Yes.
It's always challenging. There are always, there are a number of people who are engaged to this point. We're going to want to come back and take another look at it. And I almost want to, Councilmember Bagshaw was really correct in saying this is a baseline starting point. The reality is you put something out and go through the budget process, there's a broader set of people that are going to come in and take a look at it. And we may, there may indeed be revisions as we go forward, but I'm going to confirm with Councilmember Bagshaw, there is a financial reality that gives us almost so much flexibility. But Christy, what's the outreach process?
So I think the mayor and Councilmember Bagshaw are absolutely right. And that is a very insightful question. How do you bring diverse communities together to talk about how do we share resources and share needs. And what we want to do, this whole approach is based on not using a cookie cutter model, but tailoring something that responds to the unique needs of the citizens we may serve in Magnolia and Ballard or wherever the location is. So we're willing to work with the permanent neighborhoods and parks to have tailored meetings that respond to the hours when people can come to those meetings and have those discussions. We have to roll out data, talk about how we reach decisions. I'm sure there will be a lot of concern from particular neighborhoods on how you landed on my community center, and we need to talk about that, be transparent about that data and the process that drove the decision. So we're planning to do that.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the specific services people might use at the reduced hours center? So does it include drop-in hours at the gym or childcare?
Sure. So at the reduced hour centers, the idea here is that when you think about park programs at community centers, they tend to fall into a couple of buckets. One would be drop-in use, where you could walk right in the door of a building and go to the gymnasium and shoot hoops. You don't need to sign up for a program. You don't need to be scheduled for that. You just show up and drop in. The other level of use is programmatic use, where we typically think of that as registered use, where you have to sign in, you have to register. You typically may be paying for a class. The idea is to distribute or allocate each kinds of recreational use, both drop-in and programmable uses, and spread those around the system. But I think the idea here fundamentally is that all community centers need to have some level of drop-in use, because not everybody's going to want to pay for a program or can pay for a program. Although we do have a very robust subsidy program in North School.
Hi, my name is Jennifer and I live in Westwood, and I just want to say if we want more people to use the community centers, they need to be functional. The fitness room there has one treadmill and only one, and it's been broken for a year and a half. And there's people who are dying to use the treadmill machines because it's only $2 drop-in fee, and it shouldn't be a big expense, $2,000 to put some machines in there. So please make things functional if you want us to come.
Thank you for that. Now, was that Yesler Community Center?
Southwest.
Oh, Southwest Community Center. We'll look into that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, one more question? One more question? Yes.
My name is Masara Hanna, and I'm from the neighborhood. I'm a resident of the High Point. I would just want to add that I live in a family with a $600 total income, and I'm looking at the tennis programs here, or the classes, and it costs $80. It's only for a month and twice a month. And I don't think that makes sense for a family like me.
This is the tennis program?
Yeah.
Yeah, the cost of the tennis program.
So the Park Department has a scholarship office, and almost every program we offer, people can sign up, and our goal here is not to exclude any of our programs based on who we pay. So I'd be happy to give you my card and tell you how you would make application for the scholarship program to get a scholarship.
So I'm just going to say last word, both of these last two questions, and actually the earlier question about outreach. I think I've done something like 40 walking tours of neighborhoods, town hall Q&A sessions this year, and one of the most important things, we can have communities have a conversation with government about what they need. One of the most important things in this city is a conversation where community members have conversations with other community members about their needs. Because that's where we start really getting the insights and the ability to start reprioritizing. And it's particularly important with the economic situation and budget situation we face. So that's just an observation to all of. I want to thank all of the members of the committee that worked on this and the folks that are working on that outreach, because it's ultimately we will respond to that broader community conversation about all of this. So thank you, everybody.